I don't know that the jury's going to buy that, because it's the people he allegedly killed had nothing to do with his financial crimes.
Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor, where we're all just trying to survive in a rough world.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime, and today is no different. It's week 3 of the double murder trial of embattled former attorney Alex Murdaugh. Murdaugh, of course, is accused of killing both his wife Maggie and son Paul at the family's Colleton County property back on June 7th, 2021. And that, my friends, is just a fraction of the story. Our best guest today to discuss it all, Sarah Ford, has served as legal director at the South Carolina Victim Assistance Network since 2017, where she leads a team of attorneys and advocates to provide direct legal services to South Carolina crime victims. And Mandy Powers Norrell, we didn't expect her on the program today, but nevertheless, here she is. She is an attorney, a politician, and former Democratic member of the South Carolina House of Representatives. She formerly represented House District 44, which comprises the southern portion of Lancaster County. A couple of quick programming notes. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're at Podcast STS. And as my 7 and 8-year-old daughters always say, please hit that subscribe button and the like button. It gets the algorithm chugging. So not one, but 2 brand new faces here on STS. I love when that happens. Sarah, since you were booked, and we booked Mandy about 29 seconds ago due to some other technical issues, let's start with you. What is your 360 bird's eye view of this trial so far? It is a cliche, but proving to be true, a circus, right?
I hate everyone today. I mean, I do. Today was just like my BS meter has just gotten to its limit overall with everything. And that's where I'm at today. But that's probably not a fair view of the entire trial, because we're going into finishing up our 3rd week. We've been on a roller coaster, and that's to be expected when, you're in trial. The ups, the downs. One day you're like, well, the prosecution is up. The next day, the defense is up. And so that's to be expected. But there have been some hard stops recently. I mean, I feel like I'm in the back of a 1984 LeBaron with a stick shift. Like, it's constantly, forward, back, and it's been a lot.
I love that analogy.
It's been a lot, yeah.
Mandy, to you, same feeling, this herky-jerky feeling, and in your estimation right now, who's edging out who, the state or the defense?
It feels like there was a momentum shift. It's like the end of the day yesterday coming into today. It felt like the prosecution was, making some headway, and then people have really started to say, I can't follow this. The prosecution is not giving me a narrative. They're not giving me a timeline. I'm going from, a witness from June 7th to a witness who's talking about September to someone who's talking about something that happened in 2015. And we're really going back and forth. And then we're doing chain of custody witnesses. And I think that the prosecution feels like they're going to keep the jury awake and still get the important stuff in that they have to get in regarding chain of custody, if they pepper some like boring fact witnesses with some exciting fact witnesses, and they're not as concerned about the narrative or the line. And I know they wrap it all up at the end and they tell the story, but the end here is going to be weeks away. So when they're telling the story in closing, they're going to be like, remember a month ago when so-and-so testified to this? The jury's not going to remember it. It really feels like the prosecution has lost a good bit of its momentum, and that's really bad for them because the defense hasn't even gotten started with its side yet.
And Sarah, To that point, I mean, essentially the narrative for the state, the motive is he was trying to deflect or get empathy as a result of these 99 financial crimes. A lot of people are, blasting the prosecution for exactly the reasons Mandy just mentioned. Do you agree with that assessment that they're just not putting together a story that's believable, certainly not beyond reasonable doubt?
I'm a former prosecutor, and I want to give a lot of leeway to the prosecution. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I think so many of us, we think, okay, well, let's get it done, Jack McCoy style. And that's not what we're going to see here. This is not Law and Order. And you're going to have those boring witnesses. You're going to have the person that's going to come up and testify and say, well, I took a buccal swab from this person. Great. Now you're gone. And we hear 17 other people that do something similar to that. So there's not that mic drop Perry Mason moment. But I think what the issue is, for me at least, watching this, is that the trial has become so disjointed that we are up, down. What is this person even talking about? That I think they're really going to lose the jury. I mean, they're losing people that are super pro prosecution. So I mean, I can't imagine those jurors. I mean, looking at their faces last week, I mean, they're looking around, seeing who's in the audience, because they're just, give us some framework, and they're not getting that. It's like soup. It's like a salad that you just keep dumping everything in and saying, I'll tell you what kind of salad it is at the end. And I don't think it's working right now.
But Sarah, why not? I mean, they've got to have a lot of people, consulting them, telling them it's a small world in that part of South Carolina. Why are they not able to get their act together, seemingly?
I think, looking at it from as a former prosecutor, you've got, your first chair, you've got your person who's, this is my show, and everyone is here to help me do this. So you've got some people that are going to be doing chain witnesses and chain witnesses only. You've got some people who are going to be doing the more technical stuff, who are going to be doing, phone stuff and text messages. Then you've got people who are really going to be those massagers, so to speak, that can really get with that witness and really help them tell their story to the jury. So you've got people kind of working in a silo, but the problem is they're all in separate silos right now. I don't even know if they're in the same field. I mean, everyone needs to be coming at it where they're working together, building upon what the previous prosecutor and those witnesses are saying. And that's just not happening right now. The information that they're getting out, the testimony, is good, but it's just not coming together.
And Mandy, how can that be resolved?
To follow up with what Sarah was saying, I think that they're also in a bubble. When you are so deeply immersed in a case, and I'm prosecuting now. I have been a personal injury attorney for 25 years, and I've just taken on prosecuting. So I've known Alex Murdaugh. Well, I didn't know Alex Murdaugh. I thought Murdaugh for a long time. But when you are, working on any kind of trial, you get so immersed that I think you start to see things, with tunnel vision. And so they decided that the motive that they would present would be, he did this to create a distraction from his financial crimes. I don't know that the jury's going to buy that, because it's the people he allegedly killed had nothing to do with his financial crimes. I think that the jury's going to look for a motive that has to do with, something closer to the financial crimes, if you're going to use that as your, distraction from the crimes as your motive. I think the motive is similar, but I think a more believable motive would acknowledge his love for his family that we're seeing people testify to. It would be more of he wanted to spare them from humiliation. He wanted to spare them from something he thought of it as a fate worse than death. If I was the prosecutor, I would be moving towards that kind of discussion of motive, rather than he just killed them for a completely unrelated reason, that was unrelated to them.
That is interesting.
I don't know that they'll adjust, because they've tried this case so many times in their minds.
So Sarah, we had
and they've said on what their motive is.
We had Danny Cevallos on, Sarah. He's an MSNBC analyst. He talks about prosecutorial overkill and thinks that all this financial evidence could actually backfire because it to that point is exactly what he's saying. It's overkill. They're not getting to the point of the actual motive of this crime. Do you agree with that to any degree?
I agree to a point. I think Judge Newman made the right call with letting the financial crimes in to a point. But right now we are missing the forest for the trees. I mean, we are in so deep. I mean, Mark Tinsley was testifying this afternoon, explaining what discovery was and interrogatories in a murder trial. We are way too deep if that's where we are. I mean, we are way in, and we don't need to be. I think that the prosecution could have done a more general approach to this, and they are just going all the way in. And I don't think that, as a former prosecutor, it scares me because I'm thinking I'm not only looking at it from them trying this case, but I'm looking at this from the perspective of if he is convicted, there are going to be, post-conviction relief motions that are going to be filed for ineffective assistance of counsel and, all sorts of things there, the appeals, and then to potentially retry this. I mean,
yeah.
Like I said, I hate everyone today. It's just a lot. It's too much.
Yeah. So I hear you. I'm actually kind of loving people today, but usually it's the other way around. So we cross.
We just split because normally I'm a lover, but today is just, I've had it.
So we're opposites today. So at the end of the day, Wednesday, we heard this testimony about the SUV, and it struck me as really interesting because basically we find out, first of all, his car was encrypted, which is supposedly unusual, and it took a year for the FBI to unencrypt it. And it turns out that when you do the math, he was basically at his mom's house for 21 minutes when we had heard like a 40-minute number before. Mandy Powers Norrell, to you, is that a big deal? Is that something that jurors are going to perk their ears up to and say, wait a minute, he said he was here for 40 minutes. He told the mother's aide to say it was, yeah. So what do you make of that?
He said he was there for 40 minutes, but he couldn't have been there for 40 minutes because it's a 20-minute drive from Moselle to Alameda. It's a 20-minute drive back, and it was an hour from the time he left until he returned. So it had to be 20 minutes. And Shelley Smith testified that it was a 20-minute visit. His phone records suggested it was a 20-minute visit. And so the records also show that it was a 20-minute visit. I think that the big information that can really be helpful from that is not only that it confirms that it is his mom's house for 20 minutes, but then when he got back, when he parked his car, when he moved his car, when he parked it again, when he moved it again, like going to the house, then going to the kennels and discovering their bodies, then going back to the house to get a gun, then going back to the kennels to call 911. I think those times are going to be potentially helpful to the prosecution if and when they really wrap it up in a narrative timeline.
In New York, there's a famous radio station, 1010 Wins, and their tagline is, give us 22 minutes, we'll give you the world. And when I heard the 21 minutes, I was like, maybe that'll give the verdict in terms of a conviction for Alex Murdaugh. But who knows? But those are the kinds of things. I'm not an attorney. I'm a former TV guy, and those are the kinds of things that make my ears perk up, at least. Now, Sarah, you said you had enough today. On top of everything else, during Thursday, apparently Buster Murdaugh gave Mark Tinsley, the attorney for Mallory Beach, the finger, and the entire family, I think, was asked to move to the back. What happened there? What was your take on that?
Well, the family has been very close to Alec the entire time and very close to the defense table. I mean, it appeared that they were exchanging paperwork. I don't know if they're giving, candy is what it looked like to me because Alec is always chomping and, it's just not a good look. But they were been very close the entire time. And then, At one point, it looked like Buster was chewing his middle finger at Mark Tinsley. I mean, come on. I get it. You hate the guy. You feel like he's the one that's ruined your life, and this all stems back to what he's done. But I mean, I'm surprised that the security and the bailiffs didn't move the Murdaugh family back 2 weeks ago. I mean, they seemed very chummy, too chummy for someone who's charged with 2 counts of murder.
So the defense obviously is trying to prove that Alec is a family man who loves his wife, loved his son, could never brutally murder them. Mandy, are they doing a good job of that for the most part or no?
I think, I mean, I knew Alec. I can tell you he is one of the most charming people I have ever known in my life. I see a different side of him now. But before I knew this side of Alec, I told you that, like, he lights up a room. He makes you feel like the most important person around. He has an extremely charming side. And I think that the prosecution is trying to acknowledge with their witnesses, but they're also bringing up witnesses who, like, Alec has stolen from, who've had to repay his debts, who should be absolutely furious with him, and you can still see it within them that they are conflicted. You know, his partners had to come up with $5 million to repay money he stole from clients. And the one partner that we've seen, and Chris Wilson today, he stole $129,000 from Chris Wilson. Chris put Chris Wilson in a terrible position with the South Carolina Supreme Court in the bar and with his bar license. And Chris Wilson, I think, is still, you know, he still has great affection for him. And he said today, I hope we can remain friends. So it's easy to see why, you know, this charisma really continues to carry him with people, even he has double crossed. It's easy to see why his family still supports him. And when I knew him, he always had his boys with him. He introduced his sons to everybody, had them shake our hands. And it's like we knew them because we saw them all the time. I first met Paul when he was 11 years old, and he was going to these adult reception and everything with his dad, where his dad would introduce him around. And it's just, it depends on how you define family man, but if he brought his kids to everything. So I think that comes across.
Well, I hope Buster never gave you.
And I think it's something the prosecution's going to have to deal with.
I hope Buster never gave you the finger. We are dealing. Mandy was kind enough to join us from her car very last second, and that's where you're hearing a little bit of an audio hiccup, a tiny one. So bear with us and don't send me the hate mail. But just Mandy, since you know Alec, and you said you've known him since I think you said since Buster was 11 or Paul was 11. I forget which one you just said, but
Paul,
how did you get to know him?
I think that was trial lawyers. I'm a personal injury attorney like Alec, and he and my husband were on the board of the trial lawyers, South Carolina trial lawyers together. And I remember the first time my husband met him, he said, "You're going to love this guy. He is electric. You're going to energy." And as soon as I met him, I knew, oh, that's the guy my husband's telling me about. And I like him so much. And I think we're seeing that in so many of the witnesses who come forward.
And then when you get the news, you know, back on June 7th, 2021, that the wife and son are not just murdered, but in the most horrific of ways, did you immediately say, "Oh my God, he did it"? Or were you stunned and said, "There's no way he did it"?
No. Yeah, I said those were my exact words. You know, there is no way Alex had anything to do with this. There is no way. He loves his family too much.
And have you since changed your mind?
I think that evidence stacking up against him, you know, I know that I knew him at this point because I never would have imagined that he would steal from clients. And so that tells me that he is somebody, although I thought I knew him, I never knew him. So I have I have since realized that he's not somebody I can make any assumptions about. There's no way I can know what he's capable of, because Berg has said his moral compass was broken. And when it's broken, it may never work right.
And I'm curious, in the aftermath, in the recent weeks and days, what have you and your husband said to each other about this? Because it's got to be so strange to meet someone, think that they're this like fascinating, scintillating personality, and then you find out that they're potentially not only corrupt, and not only is he a thief, which is, I think, proven, but could potentially be a murderer. How strange is that?
It has been especially strange for me. My husband is one of these people who just kind of rolls with everything, and he's like, we thought we knew him, we didn't really know him, kind of like, move on, we have things to do too. And so, but I keep wanting to talk about it, because I am thinking, how could I be such a poor judge of character? And I think you see a lot of his friends on the stand wrestling with that as well, thinking that they knew him and figuring out that they never really did. I think some people can just accept that and move on, like my husband, and some people are more like me, like, what is it within me that got that wrong?
And I have to ask, we did a show. It was my beautiful mother's idea. She said, look, no one at all has talked about Maggie. Even, Sarah, we just lost her. She'll pop back up, I hope. It's all good. Did you know Alec too, Sarah, or no?
By reputation. I knew him by reputation. I attended several of the trial lawyers conferences. He and his firm were very well known in the South Carolina legal community. So I think to say that everyone was completely shocked when all of this happened would be an understatement. I mean, we're a small state, we're a small legal community. But then I also think about it, looking at it from, people that, prosecuted and represented, I can count on one hand the amount of times that I feel like I've been in a room with a client or a defendant who was pure evil. I think that sometimes we expect that we're going to have that lightning bolt and we're just going to know. But I think that's the issue with people who commit crimes like this, is that, we don't always know what's going on. And that's what makes it particularly scary and uneasy for people who know him or thought they did.
Yeah, it is really eerie to be in that situation where you think you know somebody, but you don't. Mandy, I'm not sure if you're back and able to hear us. If so, I was saying that we just did a program all about Maggie, because no one is talking about Maggie. And it was interesting to get that perspective. I think Mandy is working to get her shop back up. But Sarah, to you, the state today called Chris Wilson. We were just talking about this, an attorney and a very, very close friend, if not best friend of Alex Murdaugh. And he, I think Mandy said, stole $129,000. It was $192,000. Yeah. And then there was this $792,000 amount in there too. And Alec, in a back and forth via text with Chris Wilson, wrote, "I need to get the check today. If it's just too much for you, I'll deal with it." Wilson said Alec told him he was just going to put his share into an annuity. So he needed the checks written directly to him instead of the law firm. Again, does all this financial stuff, I understand obviously why the state is bringing it in, but at some point, is it making the jury go to sleep in their box?
Yes. I mean, it's making me go to sleep, and this is what I do every day. With this information, I think that the state was on a roll there trying to establish, that the financial crimes were part of the motive here, or were the motive. But I think you don't need 7, 8, 9 witnesses to show that. You don't need to read every line of their financials to show that, he was negative 3,000 in this. He had, 7,500 or whatever it was in his, health savings account. we don't need all of that to know that he stole from these people. He was in trouble and he was desperate. I don't think they need all of that. And I think it's overkill. And I'm concerned now because with the loss of momentum, I'm second guessing myself. And Judge New, was this the right call? Because maybe they didn't need it.
I'm starting to think I'm watching a trial with Bernie Madoff as a defendant, more so than Alex Murdaugh. So it's interesting. And this is something that keeps coming up on our show about note taking. And there is no note taking. And it doesn't seem like there's too many salient moments that you need to captivate a jury. But again, some people say, the trial was supposed to be over at the end of next week. There's no way in heck that is happening. But Mandy, I know you're out there in your car and we greatly appreciate it. I was going to ask you about Maggie. What was Maggie like when you met her, and how do you think she should be remembered?
So I don't know how I'm coming through. I've had to reboot. Maggie it would generally be Alec and the boys. And they were, at all of these receptions together. And I'm only talking about, the lawyer conventions that they keep talking about during the trial. Alec brought Buster and Paul with him to just everything. And I would see them, when they would go out to dinner in the evenings and that kind of thing, but we never went to dinner with them. So my impression of Maggie was that she was like a lot of the other, wives who didn't practice. Like my husband and I practiced together. So we had all of the, attorney things to talk about with colleagues. And Maggie she would do other things when she was at the conventions. I think she liked to shop. And I think she would go out, during the day when we would be in the seminars and everything and maybe shop. And she, I think, was a very loving mother and adored her sons. I think that she gave them everything that they wanted. And just as Alex did, they really did give the impression of a very close-knit family. This is not something that is new in the defense presentation of Alec. That's the impression that a lot of people had of them.
Something that really resonated with me today, and it was a very minor thing, it was with Chris Wilson's testimony. Sarah, I'm curious to get your take on this. We live in a world of Facebook and Instagram where everyone's life is perfect. And Chris Wilson said, and this is a quote, he's talking about Alec, of course. He says, one of the biggest dogs in that firm, one of the biggest producers they had, seemed to own a lot of things, do a lot of things, spend money, seemed like they were doing very well. And he specifically was doing very well. That's something I would say to my wife about the dads at my kids' school. Many who are doing very well, but it just goes to the point that you never really know. And what we're talking about, you just never know what's going on. Is that something that the state can play up a little more and something that they're failing to do by follow-up questions with certain witnesses, Sarah?
I think that's a really great point, Joel. I think that, in my opinion, the state is getting to these questions, but they're just missing the mark of connecting that for the jury. We can ask, it looked like he had everything, but did he really? And asking those follow-up questions to show that to the jury is just not happening. And that's a problem because this is their time to shine, to get their take on what happened out there. And I think that these moments where they're just putting information out there without any context is really going to hurt them in the long run. And I do want to just say one thing about, you were talking about Maggie. I think that's really an important question that not a lot of people are asking. Our system is so defendant centric, and it should be to a certain extent because the defendant is looking at losing, life and liberty. However, but for what happened to Maggie and Paul, none of this would be going on. And I think that if, we are losing sight of the victims here. And I think that that's a problem. So, as a victims' rights attorney, I appreciate that question to Mandy and wish more people were talking about that.
And Sarah, right back to you, because you're a, victims' rights attorney and an advocate. Why, in your opinion, that her family has not publicly commented? I don't believe that they're there. Why? Is it a fear factor?
It could be. I don't think that's what it is. I think that, this is the worst thing that they can imagine happening, and it happened. So I think that they're dealing with that. They're dealing with someone who they thought they knew and loved he's on trial for that. I mean, we've heard Mandy describe that and how she's trying to rationalize that. I mean, these are, his sister-in-law, brother-in-law, all of those folks. I think it's incredibly traumatizing for them, as it should be, understandably. And I think that going through that, sitting there day after day after day, hearing all of this, not only the loss of their, sister, nephew, family member, but hearing how they absolutely did not know, potentially, this person that they've spent 20, 30, 40 years loving as a son, as a brother. I mean, I get why they don't want to be there. And I think it's really hard. People want to say, well, why aren't they doing that? Why aren't they doing that? I think we're asking the wrong question there. I think, anytime that we're putting the victims on notice of why aren't they performing like we think they should, I think we're in the wrong neighborhood.
I would tend to agree, although it's a question that we ask as journalists. But
another thing to note is that the Brandsetters are on the list of witnesses for the defense. They're not on the list for the state. So that, to me, tells me that they believe he's innocent. And, I think for a lot of the family, their heart can't let them believe otherwise.
A heart can get in the way. Obviously, it can make one emotional. Sarah, to you, do you think the state's strongest evidence right now are those two videos, the video, what I call the dogtail video, just a few moments before the alleged murders take place, and then the one with the change of clothes, which is an hour and change before? Is that the strongest evidence right now that the state has? Do you think that places him, in essence, at the crime and shows that there was a change of clothing?
Yes. I mean, I do. I think it shows everything he told us in his alibi. He's a liar. I mean, we know that. But I think it helps to say, okay, well, he said that he was doing, he was taking a nap, or he was doing, he was up at the house and he wasn't there. Yet we know he was right there. And we know from the timeline that the state is trying to elicit out of all this testimony that it would have been virtually impossible for him not to have been present or have heard gunshots or been very, very close by. I don't think that that's come out as clearly as the state has wanted it to, but I'm hopeful with additional law enforcement folks to testify that maybe they'll clear that up. And then let's not forget that we've got, Eddie, who's coming up, cousin Eddie, potentially testifying tomorrow or Monday. I mean, we don't know what he's going to say. I mean, it could completely change the trajectory of this trial. I mean, we think we're going, taking a left. I mean, we might be going in circles by tomorrow. I mean,
and we've had Amy Zimmercheck on the show, and she represents cousin Eddie, cousin Eddie Smith, and hopefully we'll get the inside track with her. But he's definitely one of the characters in this trial, and we'll see how that goes, how it plays out. But she is a great defense attorney and is looking out for her client and seems to be very confident about what he might say. Mandy, you're kind of nodding your head during the discussion about the video evidence. Do you think that that's the strongest stuff the state has right now?
I think the strongest stuff the state has is the dogtail video, hands down, the strongest, because it shows him to be a liar. The other video that I think is stronger than the Snapchat one with the tree, where it shows that he changed clothes, is the one of him, talking to Sled in the car, where it shows his clothes looked clean. There's no way that he touched their bodies and could be as clean as he was. So that proves that he had cleaned himself up or never touched their bodies. Either way, that makes him a liar. It makes him look like he's covering something up. It makes him look like he's hiding something. And that's why I think the prosecution had so much momentum, because they brought those things very, very close together. And now we're in kind of the doldrums of financial stuff and all this. And while it's very interesting and it shows him to have a lot of pressures on him, I agree with Sarah. It's too much. And I do think they're saving Eddie Smith for a dramatic ending. And I think we're also going to see the third sled video that from the third interview that happened on August the 11th, which coincidentally was the same day that Duffy Stone, the prosecutor, recused himself, citing events of today. And we didn't know what happened on August the 11th until Jim Griffin mentioned in court one day that the third sled interview was August the 11th. So I think they may be saving that one for dramatic effect at the end.
And Joseph Scott Morgan was on our show yesterday. He's a preeminent forensic scientist, and was telling us that he's just mystified at the way Alex Murdaugh was able to kind of traipse around that crime scene, wasn't removed right away. Mandy, does that just go to show this whole, kind of like
privilege?
Yeah, privilege, and it's an old boys network, good old boys network, kind of a stereotypical Southern good old boy network. Is that the way it was and still is?
I don't know that it's a stereotypical Southern good old boy network. I think it's just indicative of privilege. It reminds me of the John Benet Ramsey crime scene, where this was a wealthy, grieving family that had a horrible thing happen to them. They wanted their friends and family near, and law enforcement just kind of let their friends and family have the run of the place, and it was a crime scene. And so this seems to be, the exact same thing played out. I don't think it's Southern. I don't think it's good old boy. I think it is privilege that happens in all over the country, probably all over the world.
Great point.
Yes,
great point. Well taken. Back to Chris Wilson. I'd just like to go through some of the stuff we saw in testimony on Thursday. Chris Wilson says that, and I just slipped my notes here, but he's talking about we got the heads up, and he went there to Moselle to talk to him after hearing about the crimes. And he says, and I quote again, "I was worried he was going to kill himself, just like I think a lot of people were, families and lawyers and partners." In a weird way, this kind of plays in, Sarah, to the state's, motive that people are now feeling sorry for him because of all these financial woes. Now he's lost his wife and son. So in a strange way, it kind of comes full circle right there. But is it strong enough, in your opinion, to continue to sway the jury into a conviction here?
Well, I think it is pretty strong. I mean, we can think about Janine Seckinger testified, and Alex, legal secretary testified about, they had these suspicions, they had conversations, and then, Alex Dad was doing poorly, and the conversation stopped for months. So I think that that's very powerful, and in showing that, these folks were rallying around him because they felt for him. His father passed away, his wife and son passed away. And so, we're not worried about the financial things. We'll figure that out later. And I think that that's really problematic. But again, it's exactly what, I think the state is trying to show that he wanted to see happen. And it did. So I think, they need to explore that a little bit more than they currently are.
And Mandy, he went on, Chris Wilson, to say about Alec, he was destroyed. He was crying, quiet, just whimpering like a hurt dog there. And then he was asked about Alex Murdaugh's opioid addiction. And Wilson says, when we socialized together, I didn't see anything that indicated that he was addicted or had a drug problem. Some people suspect he never had a drug problem. What do you make of this?
I would bet a lot of money that Alec never had a drug problem. I've been around him for years, and I know what opioid addictions, how they manifest in people. He did not have slurred speech. He didn't have the sleepy eyes that you see. He was very energetic. He never, ever seemed to have an opioid addiction. My theory is that was used to explain why he wrote checks to drug dealers, and not that he actually had, because opioid addictions don't cost millions of dollars. I also do bankruptcy. I know what opioid addictions cost, and a middle-class person can afford an opioid addiction. You know, it might make them insolvent ultimately, but it doesn't take a millionaire to have an opioid addiction. And he wasn't, it makes no sense that that's what he was stealing money for. It also makes no sense that he, based on his mannerisms, based on his energy level, based on just the way he interacted with people, I never saw a sign of an opioid addiction ever.
But you feel bad, or they want you to feel bad, because let's send him to rehab. He's been through all of this, and then he's in rehab, and it's like, oh, I have this addiction. Like, come on.
That's what every celebrity and their mother does. Whenever they get in trouble, they go right to
exhaustion,
rehab.
Right? I mean, he talk about exhaustion. I mean, come on. That is, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, I think it was probably a smart move by his legal team. They're like, get the hell out of here. You need to go to rehab or something. But he didn't fit the, I mean, you're right. He did not fit the mold. He did not appear to be someone who, you know, had an opioid addiction. I mean, I think it's just another, you know, feather in the cap of feel bad for me because all of these things have happened to me.
We had a gentleman, I shouldn't say a guy, Kim Varner, who's actually a very seasoned criminal defense attorney, been practicing in South Carolina since the late 70s, very smart, very savvy. And like a good criminal defense attorney, he said, look, there was something going on with drugs, and this has the makings of a cartel hit. We've been talking about the state's argument. Is that a ridiculous argument for the defense to make? Look, there was something bigger going on here. 2 guns were used. Or does that dogtail video just, pardon the rough language, screw the defense in the end, Mandy?
Until the dogtail video, that's exactly what I thought had happened. I thought that Alec was keeping quiet to protect Buster, and that he knew who had come after his family. I thought that, because, you know, in my mind, I'm trying to think of anything that makes him innocent, because I did not want to be wrong about him. And I thought that, you know, and this is before all of the financial crimes came out too, because that was sort of a deal changer for me. But yeah, I thought this was some very dangerous people that he had gotten mixed up with. They were demanding more and more money. He was stealing money to give to them, and that they had threatened him that if he didn't get them a certain amount of money that he just was somehow unable to get, that they would kill his family, and that they made good on that threat, and that they left Buster alone so that Alec would get them some money later in order to protect Buster. That was the story I made up in my own head. I think it still is a plausible defense.
Sure sounds like one. Couple more things regarding testimony on Thursday, then we'll get to some STS Nation questions and comments, and we'll let you guys get to your event because you've been very gracious with your time here. So the defense tried to get Tony Satterfield's testimony excluded, to which Judge Newman said, buzz off. And on this witness stand on Thursday, Tony Satterfield, of course, is the son of Gloria Satterfield, the former housekeeper who fell down the stairs and later died. And Alec said to Tony, according to Tony, I'm going to take care of you boys. He had that Alex said he would file a claim against his insurance company with the goal of getting the 2 sons at least $100,000 each. Sarah, to you, what does this do for the jury, knowing the amount of money that he actually stole, promising these guys $100,000 apiece?
I wasn't in the courtroom this afternoon, but reports from people who were said that every juror, as Tony Satterfield was testifying, stared at Alex Murdaugh at some point. Every single one of those jurors looked at Alex Murdaugh. And I think that that's huge. I mean, to know that you've put the money in the bank years before. And you've got this young man and his brother who obviously are very they've lost their mother, and he's following up as clients do, as they should. It's we're working on it. We're working on it, hopefully by the end of the year. I mean, what a huge violation of trust. And so I think that was helpful to the state today. I think that was a really, if we're giving, shining medals for everybody, that would be the shining medal moment for me, for the state today. And that they got that testimony out from Tony Satterfield. He was able to withstand cross-examination there, did a really good job of showing Alex Murdaugh is a complete and utter liar. This is what he does to the most vulnerable of people. Maybe, people keep saying, why would he do this to his wife and son? Well, if he's doing this to the most vulnerable people that he promised that he would take care of, maybe it's not such a stretch. And so I think that was a good moment for the state today.
Let's move on to some questions and comments. The first one comes from Susie Ann, and Mandy, we're going to toss this one to you. And I love this comment. And she says, I love this judge. With righteous command in response to an objection for leading, he tells the lawyer, don't lead the witness. I also like that he gently demands the legal basis for an objection. It always bothers me for some judges who rule without one. I'm not sure what that last part means, but Mandy, to her point, how good a job is Judge Newman doing so far? He seems to be a class act, in control for sure.
Judge Newman is one of the best judges that we have in South Carolina. He is absolutely a class act. And one thing that a lot of people probably don't know is Judge Newman lost his own son suddenly to a heart attack or an aneurysm shortly before this trial began. And a lot of us thought that it would be postponed to give him time to grieve and deal with the sudden loss of his.
Oh, and she just bounced off. So, Sarah, I'm going to get to the next comment right to you here. Cindy Woodburn. Since Alex erased his phone calls, I'm wondering who he called before and after the 911 call. He seemed fairly anxious to get off the call and call family and get a shotgun. What do you make of that, Sarah?
It's very curious. I mean, I loved, I was talking with some friends yesterday, if I show up at your house and I'm, I don't call you and say, I'm here, unless I'm trying to establish some sort of timeline that, oh, hello, I'm just going to knock on the door. I'm going to walk in and say, hey, what's up? So it seems very calculated to me. We don't convict people on suspicion or, that person's a liar. But if we're add all of these things up, it's a problem for Alec. I think it's a real big problem for him.
I mean, it's a cliche, but I said yesterday, and I'll say it again today, where there's smoke, oftentimes there's fire, and there seems to be a lot of smoke billowing up around Alex Murdaugh right now. Mandy, this next one is from Chris Lawson. He writes, Alex used the rain as a bonus. It rained hard that night, which a lot of people forget. So when he washed off with a hose, it was totally overlooked as an issue. Did he maybe get lucky with rain?
I don't think so, because it had not rained when the first responders got there, and they noticed that there was a puddle of water that had no obvious origin, and they made note of that. So I think that I don't think that he was calculating enough to think, hey, it will rain later tonight, check the weather and all that, because I don't think he was thinking rationally at all. But I don't think that the rain ended up helping, other than later when it may have taken out some potential evidence, tracks or footprints or something like that. But the first responders were able to note where puddles of water were that had no clear origin.
Good distinction there. Sarah, to you from ELF 1845. I haven't heard the coroner's time of death, which I believe is somewhere between 9:06 and 9:30, if I'm right about that. Based on car evidence, it is hard to believe he had time to clean up the scene, shower, get rid of clothes, weapons. State still has not proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you agree with ELF?
I do agree with Elf. I don't think they're supposed to at this point. I mean, for the state, we can't look and say, well, you're a third of the way through, and I don't believe what you want us to do at the end. We got to get to the ending point. When we are, I mean, everybody's asking that question. It doesn't seem like it's going to be anytime soon, but I don't think we're supposed to. People say, well, I think he's guilty, or I think he's in it. I think it's too soon for us to have that conversation. I mean, of course we want to talk about it and say, this is where I think it's headed. But, I think that I do agree that we've got a long way to go. And I know that's really difficult. Mandy and I've been talking about that. It's like, this is if we're looking at this as a puzzle, we are missing so many pieces right now. We're going to get them. I mean, we're going to hear from the coroner. We're going to hear from, the folks that the pathologist with the autopsy. We're going to hear from those folks, other people, from law enforcement. We've got a long way to go still.
But by the way, Sarah, they said the trial would be over February 17th. That's a week. In a week's time. How many more weeks do you think it goes, Sarah?
When Creighton Waters this afternoon said, I think we'll be ready, we'll be done by, meaning the state will be done by, midweek, meaning next week, like in 3 days. I was like, you've got to be kidding me, Creighton. I mean, come on. Like, we've got Curtis Eddie Smith to testify. You've got all of these technical people who still have to testify, the chief investigators. I mean, Godspeed to him, but it doesn't, from the outside perspective, it looks like we're still staring into the abyss. And I think he is overly optimistic. But then again, he knows all the deets that we don't know. So I guess we'll see.
And then Mandy's got deets about Alec that we don't know, which is why she's getting this comment, which comes from user with 1,000 letters after their name. Alec has gotten away with so much for such a long time and could be a pathological liar narcissist. We ordinary folks are just amazed by his character and how he has done these things to people all of his life with no conscience. Alec is counting on the fact that he's getting away with this crime. Do you agree with that?
He may get away with it. I have no idea, but I can tell you, I don't think I've ever met anyone as charismatic as him who struck me as one type of person and turned out to be so much the opposite. I've never been fooled that much by a person in my entire life. And I think that is something that all of his friends are struggling with right now.
It's kind of amazing when you think about what the loss of power and money can do to someone. It's wild. Lisa Parker, 5329. And I'll toss this one to you, Sarah. Remember that Jeannie Seckinger's sister is married to, this goes to show you what a small world this is. And remember that Jeannie Seckinger's sister is married to Palmetto Bank's convicted president, Russell Laffitte. So her whole life and her sister's life have both been devastated by this whole mess. As a fellow accountant, we live in a black and white world and believe in rules, right and wrong. So Alex's mess is against our character. Her anger, meaning Jeannie Seckinger, is right on to me for these reasons. Does Lisa make a valid point here?
Hell yes, she does. I mean, the fact that, Jeannie Seckinger is like, it was stolen from the fake Forge account. I was like, go ahead, sister. That's what, I mean, that is exactly how I think most people would react, that they've been betrayed and their entire career is now completely questioned because of this betrayal. I think that absolutely is completely valid. And I think something that we're not talking about either is the current president of Palmetto State Bank is the brother-in-law. His wife is a Laffitte. So just thinking about the incestuous nature of, sometimes small town life, whether here in South Carolina or elsewhere, I mean, it is a tangled web. It really is.
And we'll get a final comment here and then closing arguments, as I like to say with attorneys. This one comes from Liz Moran's. Sometimes it is the simplest things that catch your attention and make you go, wow. And this comment did. Mandy, to you. If he had nothing to hide, why did he lie? Not being at the kennel and staying longer at mom's? Question. Simple. Why? Why lie?
Right. And I think that's a question the jury will have to grapple with. The luxury that we have is that we can opine that, yeah, he probably did it, but we don't have the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt because we don't have a person's freedom and criminal record in our hands as we opine what we think. The jury, though, is going to have to, they're probably going to demand more than, yeah, this guy is a liar, because, I mean, even Dick Harpootlian, he's like explaining this away in his opening when he's saying he's in grief. He doesn't remember details. If you're in grief, you can't expect a person to remember details. And that's persuasive too. So I don't know that lie, as much as we know that's a lie, would be enough to overcome reasonable doubt.
Sarah Ford has served as legal director at the South Carolina Victim Assistance Network since 2017. She leads a team of attorneys and will soon take over for Steve Cohen, my booking producer, because she got me Mandy Powers Norrell in the last 30 seconds before we went to air tonight. Sarah, to you, how does this all end? What's your prediction? Hung jury, conviction? Where do we go from here? And what is coming in the coming days?
I tell people all the time, I went to law school. I didn't go to magician school. I wish I could look into the crystal ball and tell you what's going to happen. I think it's too soon for us to tell. I think that all of these things building, the bomb threat we haven't even covered. I mean, come on. But the bomb threat yesterday or day before yesterday, all of the chaos that's going on, I think we've got 5 alternates left? I've thought from the beginning it's going to be a mistrial. I thought it was going to be a hung jury, but now I'm like, are we even going to get to deliberations? I don't know. I think that the state has a huge. They got to get over that hill, and it's like the engine that could, and they're just not getting there. But we've got a lot of potential with witnesses. I think that'll be coming, up next week. So
Sarah, if there is a mistrial, the people obviously that will love it the most are Court TV, Law and Crime Network, and maybe yours truly. But would there be 100% for sure a retrial? And if so, in your opinion, how far off would that be? And will everyone in South Carolina just run out of energy at that point?
I think we're running out of energy as it is. We had the Chinese spy balloon. It's been a week. But I think they've got to. If it is a mistrial, I think to not attempt to try him again. I don't know. I think that would be a bad call on the.
Would that be like a year away, 6 months away, a year and a half away? What do you think?
I think it'd be quick. I think if they're going to retry it, I think they would try to do it as quickly as possible. But then you've also got 99 financial crimes that they've got to deal with too. So, I'm still questioning why the heck we're doing a murder trial when we've got 99 financial crimes that, we've got a lot of evidence on those, as we've seen the past day and a half. So, hopefully I'm ready for it. Either way, let's get it done.
Mandy Powers Norrell is a former personal injury attorney, now a prosecutor, a politician, and a former Democratic member of the South Carolina House of Representatives. Even when we get our guests in the last 29 seconds, they are among the best guests out there. Mandy, to you, do you think this ends in a mistrial? And what are you looking out for in the next days and weeks?
So I like Sarah. I thought early on, this will be a hung jury because, you're in poor Colleton County where the Murdaughs have had tremendous influence for so many years. And if you're a juror and you're thinking, even if you think he did it, you're thinking, I have the opportunity to cause this to be a mistrial and this family will owe me a favor for the rest of my life. That's got to factor into somebody's mindset. That's what I thought early on. Now I think we may get juror notes like we saw in the Russell Laffitte trial leading up to this, where, it was right before Thanksgiving and some of the jurors just wanted to go home. And so I think we may get some just, hey, I have to go to the doctor. I have to take care of a family member, something like that. Just people coming up with any sort of excuse that they can to say, I need to be excused from jury service, if they think this is going to last a lot longer, or if there may be more bomb threats, or if their family is pressuring them because they're worried for their safety. I think that could be a factor that brings us to mistrial. But it would upset me not really upset me. This feels a little bit like a waste, because we know from the financial crimes that he is facing a lifetime in prison no matter what, if he's acquitted or found guilty. And it just depends on which prison he's in. And we have so many people waiting for their day in court, and they have been waiting a lot longer than Alex Murdaugh was. This feels like another example of privilege that he's been criticized for. And, there are just so many people waiting for justice, and a lot of resources have been poured into this trial for a man who's probably never getting out of prison, even if he's acquitted of murder.
Yeah, seems like whatever it is coming his way no matter what. Huge thanks to both of you. I told you I'd get you out here at the top of the hour, and it is the top of the hour right now. Quick programming note. My beautiful, lovely mother will be live on Sunday. I'm going to tweet out the time, because the only person we cannot compete with is the Super Bowl. Joe Rogan, I can compete against. Court TV, yes, but not the Super Bowl. So I'll tweet out the time. It will be at a different time on Sunday. We'll let you know. Love you, America.